In the actual real studio, we've got Reece Shearsmith of the League of Gentlemen, now in Ghost Stories at the Duke of York's Theatre, Vicki Amedume, circus-trained star of the London Mime Festival, and Les Persaud, who turned the tragedy of his son's murder into a valuable and very hands-on enterprise to help other young men. So as we're now in various degrees of disruption during the freeze, I thought I'd first ask you how good you all are at facing up to this sort of thing with good humour. Reece, you're philosophical about it. Are you British about it?
I think I'm quite grumpy about it, to be honest. I despair at how quickly we grind to a halt at the slightest flurry of snow. But
and if you personally are sort of at an airport or something, do you kick off? Do you?
Oh no, I don't. No, of course not. No, I'm very meek, shy. I'll do anything, But then I go away and I'm furious to my family. They shouldn't have spoken to me like that.
Vicki, how about you? And you were a child refugee, so maybe that puts stuff in proportion. Does it make you patient now?
I think I'm incredibly patient, but then every time I fly to Ghana, I always fly Ghana Airways. And I remember the last time we were there, the plane broke down. And we asked when we could look forward to returning back to England, and they said when the plane was fixed, which could be
any time at all.
So it was This is comparatively kind of organised for me.
Les Persaud, what about you? I suppose the boys you mentor, patience is one of the things you're having to teach.
Yeah, patience is one of those things you've always got to have. I think I relived a story about a meeting I went to on Monday that I actually got turned up and wasn't actually on because they actually didn't have time to see me. It took me 2.5 hours to get there. I smiled and just said thank you.
Wow, that's the spirit. And up there in Glasgow, Gordon, I suppose wildlife watchers need the patience of Job. You spend all your time crouching, hoping for an animal, don't you?
Yeah, well, that's something that comes with the job. But I think in many ways it makes me more intolerant of the things that you think you can control, because obviously waiting for wild animals to do something, you know that you just have to let things happen naturally. So I probably get maybe more frustrated than most by humans, because I think just sort it out. But I think when it comes to weather, I quite like when the weather puts human beings into context and there's things that we really can't control, and the weather's one of those things that
perhaps we should all start to think of sort of the British Airports Authority as a form of wildlife, that we must wait for it to evolve.
I think a lot of the times when you're waiting, I can try not to see waiting as an act in itself, because I do so much waiting. You have to concentrate on other things, and I always, even if you sit sort of standing waiting for a bus or at an airport, if you think of it as a wait, you're just going to drive yourself crazy, because it's something that you just have to endure. So I sort of always tend to look for little details and things, or just kind of people watch, especially in airports. And I think it's a good way to spend your time, rather than just viewing it as I have to stand here for a certain amount of time, is looking for the opportunity to see something different.
We got it as theatre. Well, anyway, we're going to start with you. We've got Gordon Buchanan appears in a series about the wild black bears of Minnesota, starting on the 3rd of January on BBC Two, and his mentor in that astonishing world will be familiar to our listeners as the great Lynn Rogers, the scientist who created a uniquely trusting and understanding relationship with the bears, which we think of as dangerous. Gordon, I have to say, it's pretty clear from the films that in the beginning, even as an experienced wildlife man, you were quite frightened.
Yeah, I definitely was. I think a big part of my job is trying to understand animals and interpret their behaviour. And many animals are predictable, or most animals are. And I always felt that bears were one of those animals that were most unpredictable, because I'd had a few scrapes with them myself. I couldn't really judge what they were about to do, and I'd been chased by bears in the past, and they do things that I couldn't really understand. So I was reticent and fearful when I first went out to Minnesota, because this was an animal that I had no experience of, and ultimately an animal that could be dangerous.
Well, you'd seen, as we all had, and we heard on this programme, Dr. Rogers on television. I mean, were you completely confident that this gentle, middle-aged, bearded guy was going to keep you safe in the presence of enormous bears?
Well, he'd been doing it for 40 years, which might lead you to think that he knows exactly what he's doing, but you can be lucky for 40 years and just not come a cropper. And I did think he was a bit crazy, and I think anyone that devotes 40 years of their life to studying one particular animal and sort of almost turning your back on human society, you've got to be a little bit peculiar. But what I learned was that, you know, these animals are greatly misunderstood, and we've got this strange relationship with bears, because on one hand we like to have them as sort of these woodland creatures or cuddly toys, but on the other hand we do demonise them, and we like to be scared of them. So it's a total contradiction. So there's an endless fascination that people have with bears.
What was the first bear that you got really close to on this expedition? I mean, was there one particular bear that came near you at first, and how did that feel?
I think Lynn wanted to throw me in at the deep end, and I'm glad that he did. So instead of him holding my hand and taking me into the forest and showing me a bear, and sort of helping me lose my fear by his side, he thought it was best that I just went into the forest alone. So he gave me the radio tracking equipment and told me approximately where to find this bear. And I was sort of full of bravado up until the point that I left the rest of the crew, and I'm walking through the forest intentionally towards an animal that is bigger and stronger than me. And when I first laid eyes on the bear, there was a shock. And then it's sort of that shock suddenly kind of I was fascinated, because you're seeing a character, an individual that's leading its life hidden away from, the human world. But then as soon as she started paying attention to me, that's when the kind of fear returned, and I retreated quite hastily.
Is there an etiquette of how to behave around bears that you have to sort of learn? How the bear likes you to behave so it doesn't attack you?
Yeah, there definitely is, and I think a lot of, going back to me thinking that they were unpredictable, they've got quite complex body language, and they're very expressive. But unless you actually speak their language, you don't know what they're trying to tell you. So in the early days, you know, I got bitten and I got swatted, and I think what these animals are, they're bonkers, and they're out to get me. But looking back at some of the footage, I think, I'm just sort of, I don't have good bear manners, as we called it. You know, I'm completely misreading the situation.
So what kind of thing would make them suddenly bite you or swipe you?
Jumping on their back and riding them like a pony. They don't like that. No. Things like when a bear smacks its lips or licks its lips, it's telling you that it's nervous, or when it yawns, it's apprehensive, and you just have to, especially working that closely to these animals, which is in itself is very unusual for me.
They don't like you turning away. I think there's one point in one of the films where you're not paying the bear enough attention and it gets annoyed.
Yeah, I was actually looking at her cub, and actually people say that never get between a mother and its cub, which isn't necessarily, it's not true. But what I was doing was I was between the mother and the cub and paying the cub more attention, and the mother was there, and she was telling me in her own language that she wasn't comfortable with me paying so much attention in her cub, but I had my back to her, and she sort of let me know with her jaws clamped around my upper thigh.
Of course, what you see, of course, in cats and dogs is all this play fighting with sort of light biting, which doesn't hurt them because they've got thick fur. And presumably the bear's not really bright enough to work out that you haven't got thick fur, and if it bites, it'll really hurt you.
Well, they use their mouths as part of communication. So it wasn't a savage bite. She didn't mean to attack me. It's like what you know. Somebody's about to step out into a busy road, and you sort of take them firmly by the shoulder, which kind of feel you might give someone a shock, but it's not aggressive. And I think a lot of behaviour in other animals, certainly dogs, it's easy to read their behaviour because they're social animals. So a lot of their behaviour is similar in many ways to human behaviour. But with a black bear, they're solitary, so they have their own sort of way of communicating with other animals when they do encounter them. But most of the time they're alone in the forest, and the only time they get together is when they've got cubs or when they get together to mate.
Just in general, as a cameraman, of course, it's the shots that matter. In your work, do you sometimes find that there's a risk of you taking too much risk because you're just so fascinated by what's in the viewfinder?
As soon as you put a camera up to your eye, you suddenly kind of detach yourself from the real world and the real perils. And I remember being in a helicopter for the first time and sitting on the edge, and I was slightly worried about being, flying over a rainforest, sort of just sitting on the edge of a helicopter. But as soon as I brought the camera up to my eye, I leant out and forward, and I suppose your mind switches from the experience of being there to trying to record that. So I suppose, yes, you do take more risks because you're trying to suddenly convey a place or an animal to other people, and that's the priority rather than making sure that you stay safe.
In the second programme, I think, which I haven't seen, you take your wife and small children to meet the bears. Is that right?
Yes, I got a insurance policy on all of them, and decided that a holiday in Minnesota with the black bears would be a good place to go. No, it's funny. Ted Oakes, the producer, was sort of slightly worried that he called it this could be your Michael Jackson moment. I thought, what do you mean? That's sort of moonwalking. But what he meant was that
dangling the baby over the balcony.
Yeah, dangling the baby, and I thought, no, it can't be. It shouldn't be viewed in that way because, maybe people will view it in that way. But I, from the beginning, being fearful and thinking, no way on earth would I take my family sort of out to see these bears. My understanding grew and my knowledge of the animals grew to the point that I felt completely comfortable.
Did you take them to see a particularly nice bear that you knew to be friendly?
We just actually encountered sort of the bears that some days it's quite easy to find these bears, and sometimes they just suddenly walk into where Lynn's cabin is. But we went to see Lily, which is the bear that I had first met. But it was really, when I first told my wife what I was doing, I told her where I was going to Minnesota to spend most of the year, and she said, "Oh, that's fantastic." And I said, "Oh, well, you and the kids could come out." "Oh, brilliant. What are you filming?" I said, black bears." And she said, no way. Well, she didn't say quite no way, but there was other words thrown in there. And she didn't want me to do it, and a lot of people said, don't do that. It's reckless and it's dangerous. And it was really great for me to give the kids this amazing experience to see an animal that not many people
Do you think the
get a chance to
bear
see.
Lily, do you think she appreciated that these were your cubs?
No, I think the bears just want to ignore you, actually, and it's funny. You think, or I foolishly thought that you could have built up this relationship or something in the way that you would with a dog. Dogs like certain people.
You hoped they were going to like you, didn't you?
Yeah, I did. I wanted them to like me, and although Lynn had said, "No, these bears don't like you. They don't want you around," and I thought, no, this is sort of I've got the appropriate sort of level of charisma to appeal to a bear, and but you just realise all they want is the handful of hazelnuts that you've got in your pocket, and that's it. And once they're gone, they will happily ignore you, which gives you a fantastic opportunity as a filmmaker to suddenly follow an animal that will tolerate you being so close. But yeah, they don't care about.
But it doesn't care. Yeah. Is anyone else around this table attracted by the idea of going off and bonding with some bears, Reece?
It sounds terrifying to me. I think I'd do all the wrong things accidentally.
I worked in a circus in the States where we had quite a few wild animals on the tour with us. We had white tigers, and I quickly developed a healthy respect for animals and not trying to kind of anthropomorphise them.
You didn't want to be their friend.
They don't want to be your friend. They just exactly. They just want whatever you've got to offer them, and then.
Les, you're not attracted to the bear hunting life?
Not bears. My biggest thing to see is most probably great white sharks.
You want to see great white sharks? Not close. Oh.
I would love to cage dive if someone would take me, because they are just awesome animals.
Oh, right. Well, we're going to turn now to Les Persaud's own remarkable achievement, which is now celebrated and supported financially by the massive London Evening Standard Dispossessed appeal for the capital. The charity is called Potential, and it began in a dramatic and quite horrible way. Les, we won't make you go through it for long, but it does begin with your son Stefan, who was 16, wasn't he? What was he like? What was he hoping for?
He wanted to be a lawyer. He was a very, very good young man, cheeky, funny, brash. He's one of those guys that when you met him, you just like him. So I didn't worry about him, going to school, get involved in scrapes. That wasn't
And he wasn't into gangs and all this South London stuff.
No. They had this group of friends they went around with. The greatest thing they did was tagging on bus stops, and and that was the greatest thing he did. So I wasn't worried about him, and literally in the last sort of 3 or 4 months of his life, he said, look, Dad, it's on now. Let's buckle down. Let's get the exam results. Let's go for it. So he started doing his coursework. And the amount of times I went to his mum's house, drove back, printed things out for him. And I thought, you know what, this is about him. So literally I did it.
And so then what happened? How did he die?
Stefan was at a party, a 16th birthday party, and there was a person that didn't like him. So people had disagreements, and that person knew where Stefan was. So Stefan's friends realised that they were there. So it was just like something they were going to go and say, look, just go away, leave us alone. You know, we're having we're at someone's party. They went out to talk to them. And literally all the friends went out. It was just like a standoff. All the friends left. Stefan turned back. Rest is history.
He was just basically just beaten up and killed.
Beaten up. He was set upon by the group, beaten up with knives, baseball bats, paving slabs. So literally, I got a call at about 9:30 on the 23rd of April 2005 to say Stefan has been attacked and he's in hospital. So I literally just kind of was watching TV at home, just jumped up, got to the hospital, didn't know what I was expecting. What I saw was my oldest son covered in blood.
So he was in intensive care for a period and then he died. How soon after he died was it that you decided to do something?
Well, I knew all the way along that, if my heart of hearts, I knew that I just couldn't go through this again. So I, all the way through, because Stefan died on the 10th of May, but didn't get buried till the 22nd of July because of all the police investigations. There was one period of time that Stefan's brain had to be removed from his body for forensic, and I was the only one in the family that knew about it because I chose not to. And I thought, you know what, it's something that I'm going to do. I'm going to try and help his friends. But
that's an extraordinary thing to be focusing suddenly on his friends. What was it? Was there a trigger moment when you sort of thought, I must do something for the others?
Well, I knew I wanted to help them, but during the funeral, two things that happened to me. One was that the funeral director said, please carry your son's coffin because you'll regret it for the rest of your life. And I looked at him like, I'm grieving here. And he went, no, seriously, do it. And I did it. It's the best thing that ever happened to me. And during the service, 4 of his friends went up to speak about Stefan, and they broke down. And I was the first person who got up, got them to finish what they were saying. And I thought, you know what? I've got to help these guys. So during the wake, we were in a garden where it was being held, and everyone was getting very angry and agitated. And I turned around and said, look, guys, I need you guys to focus. No recriminations, no violent attacks against anybody else. All I want you to do is focus on going, because remember, they're just about doing their GCSEs, getting into college, and to turn around and get them through into possibly university later. But college was the main thing that I wanted to do. So when I said that, I said, I will become your Alex Ferguson. And it's right funny, because when I said it, I remember thinking, was I drunk? Was I a bit delusional? I don't know, but it was just something that I'd said. So the next couple of years, I kind of got them to meet with me with their timetables. I kind of got them their computer fixed because I worked in IT, so I made sure I could communicate with them. Everywhere they were on the road, so they weren't getting in trouble, I seemed to be there, and I don't know why. I just did.
So this group of lads and you just met and you mentored them, really.
Yeah.
You acted as a sort of outside the family father or uncle, favourite uncle to them. And this has worked, hasn't it? I mean, the record of this group of lads, they have not been in more trouble, have they?
No, I mean, to their credit, I mean, when we started off, the group was bigger, but you won't get everybody. And the group of young men and some young ladies now, they're all now working either full-time or part-time for Potential. They're mentoring. We've got, I think it's 18 after-school clubs. We mentor in 4 schools. We run a music project. I'm trying to think. We have a football project, a cricket project. And for us, the actual thing that's in the paper is the Options project, which is talking about kids about gang, knife and gun awareness program.
That's so interesting, because what you set out to do was to help them and to get them through their GCSEs and into college and get on with their lives and have the life that your son wasn't able to have. And yet they now want to do it for other people. They want to pass it on. Was there a particular point where you suddenly realised that they wanted to be the ones doing it?
Well, we had a kind of moment, because we used to meet at a youth centre every week, and the police came to us about how could they approach a group of young people. So we said, okay, let's sit down, let's talk about what you've got going on with these young people, because there was a lot of friction between them and the young people and the police. So we discussed it with them, how to get forward, and we formed a bond with the local Safe Neighbourhood team, and the sergeant that was there at the time, a guy called Simon Cook. We were able to, we thought, we need to go a bit further than this, and between the team, Simon and ourselves, we set up what is the options programme. And on the very first lesson we did, we were filmed by the BBC for something, we had local press, and a young man came to us at the end of it with a sharpened knitting needle and said, I've been carrying this for protection, but I don't need to carry it anymore. And we went, if we can just do one person, stop them from getting in trouble, then we've done our job.
But every time somebody else's kid is killed, and it happens far too often in South London, I mean, that must be extra terrible for you, really, almost more than for the rest of us outsiders.
It is, but I'm trying to make sure that Stefan's life wasn't in vain. He would have been would I have been doing this 5.5 years ago? No. But it's something that seems to be guiding me, and I seem to be doing okay. Currently, we formed the charity and we're doing very well, but I work with a special bunch of people, and they are very, very my driving force. If I'm ever low, they kind of said, they kind of pick me up and say the old man's, having a cob on, or he's really getting moany. So they said, look, let him shout for a bit, and they're very, very good young people.
Well, it's a remarkable, goodness, we're all sitting here gobsmacked, aren't we, by your ability to do this. And I must just ask you one other thing. The rest of your family, have they been behind you all the way in this? Because families aren't always, after a death, united that way.
Well, I must say, my family, who I think some of them might be listening today, think that I'm some sort of incredible person, because the strength I have. And I said to them, I wouldn't be like that unless you guys were around. You guys are behind me 100%. So when I'm low, I'm unhappy, I'm sad, I'm like anybody else. I have good and bad days. But they are behind me, and without them, I couldn't do this. And, especially my inner family, my wife, my 2 kids, they keep me sane, keep my feet on the ground, I still do the dad things and, take my kids wherever they need to go because they've got clubs and stuff to go to. So it's something that I'm very proud of, to be a father of 2 now.
That's a tribute to your Stefan as well.
Thank you.
Goodness. Yes, we're all sitting a bit sort of stunned here. You've stunned us, Les. Science does. We'll move on to the world of show business, which also has its good and high effects. Reece Shearsmith is with us. He is narrating at the moment, narrating, and the character creeps into the story as well. The surprise hit in the West End of Ghost Stories, which is at the Duke of York's Theatre. All very dim, flickering bulbs in the auditorium, howling winds, and a story which has caused people to gasp and shriek. Have you had any shrieks?
Oh, yes.
I've heard of shrieks. There's a lot of gasping and hyperventilating goes on down there.
Yes, it's a thrill ride from the beginning. So as you enter the theatre, the whole place is kind of decked out with very creepy, kind of dripping, scary kind of sounds that just unsettle you, and then you sit in your seat, and you're for 90 minutes you're strapped into this terror ride. Which is, I think, on the one hand, Ghost Stories is done really well because I think it's, it taps into that the thing of being on a roller coaster and having the thrill of feeling scared and then getting off and the exhilaration of that. But as a play itself, Jeremy Dyson and Andy Nyman that wrote this play, I think it's a really great piece of theatre. And aside from the fact that it is a scary thing and it's kind of a thrilling thing,
they of course, like you, are founders of the dark and spoofy League of Gentlemen and of Psychoville. And so, are you drawn towards the darkness, Reece? What is it about you?
Well, you know what? It's never really been our remit to try to do something that was dark. We thought we didn't ever sit down and think, what hasn't been done, a comedy that's kind of dark. It was only ever our sense of humour. So perhaps it's we plough a certain furrow that's quite dark in people's minds, but it's kind of people's thresholds. Some people come to see ghost stories and they're not frightened at all, and other people are literally, there are ambulances outside. People are terrified.
Haven't been needed yet.
Yes. So it's just what gets you or doesn't. I mean, ghost stories, I find it deeply unsettling, but some people find it not at all frightening. But that's just people. And our shows are the same. People find them very not watchable and not funny in the slightest.
Well, it's a lad. I think probably Les will kind of recognise this because it's a lad thing, isn't it? I mean, the boys do like a bit of dark humour, don't they?
They certainly do.
Right, yeah. Well, maybe that's what it is. Yeah, I'm not quite. I can't fathom it. I don't like to think about it too much because I think the magic or whatever it is that we do will wear off.
When you're doing the parapsychologist part in Ghost Stories, where he narrates and then eventually he gets drawn into it, did you think a lot about your tone and how matter of fact to make it, or whether to put in any menace into it early?
Yeah, well, I mean, the whole show is kind of is out to unsettle you from the start or wrong foot you in the way that you don't quite know what you're going to get. I mean, Ghost Stories has been on for over a year now, and it's just extended till June, and you can't find out anything about it, which I think is fantastic. You go in not really knowing what you're going to get, and certainly the plot wise you it unfolds before you without any spoilers, which I think in this day and age where you know everything in the trailer, or you kind of already,
the Coronation Street Viaduct. We were waiting for that for 3 months. It's terrible.
Exactly, precisely. So to go in not really knowing what you're going to get and actually be genuinely surprised and wrong-footed is a great thing. So I'm not going to tell you now what happens, but I did want to, you're lulled in, and certainly by my character who just begins this journey and talks to the audience and draws you in very slowly. That's all part of the psychology of getting you a little bit scared in your seat.
One of the big things about you and the League of Gentlemen was the enormous variety of characters and voices that you developed.
Yeah.
You liked inventing these very unsettling people. Papa Lazarou and Jeff the manager. I mean, you could go all the way from sort of irritating Git through to Psycho.
Yeah. Well, that's my range. You said it in a nutshell. But I do. We by the end of the third series of the League Gentlemen, we'd done about 20 characters each. Some people do one character in their career.
Favourites? I mean, do you have favourites that you kind of slip into almost unwillingly? From time to time?
I am Jeff Tips really. I'm kind of a very frustrated. I get angry. I've always find it very funny when people get angry too quickly. It's kind of comical. I use it for comic effect in a lot of my characters, and it's quite funny to see rage, impotent rage.
Well, that sort of that sudden whoop,
from nowhere,
upswing
over nothing,
from nowhere.
over absolutely nothing. Yeah,
the Basil Fawlty is thank you God beating up the car.
Yes, exactly that. Yeah, you can't get. If I get anywhere near that, then I'd be happy.
Tell me about the beginnings of the League of Gentlemen, because you must have been all a bit taken aback by the growth. I mean, the awards it was garlanded with, and the huge success and everything moving on. Did it really genuinely start as a lark between a group of you?
Yeah, we'd met at, we were all at the same college together, Bretton Hall, which is now defunct. It's actually a teacher training college for police now. It's closed. It's affiliated to Leeds University now. And we just began, I mean, we didn't really do anything together at college, but we left, and then, a few years later we started to do these sketches on the Fringe, basically. And it was the Edinburgh Fringe Festival where we put together our best of bits, and that was our hour of the first ever incarnation of the League of Gentlemen, and it was sketches and characters really that just evolved. And then we had the Radio 4 series, and from there the TV. It just went on for 10 years.
Where did the name League of Gentlemen spring from?
It was Mark Gatiss thought of the title of our troupe, because we thought we'd wrong foot people with this kind of quite we thought it would seem quite Oxbridge, you know, and our original...
the Edinburgh Fringe way to get noticed.
Exactly, yes.
Be posh.
Be posh, and we thought we'd wrong foot the audience. We had tuxedos on the poster, and it was all very Cambridge footlights, and yet it was this very dark kind of subversive set of 4 men from the north, and that... You know, but then we realised very quickly we'd marketed it wrong, because we'd had all these little old ladies coming in thinking it was Cambridge Footlights. So then we have these horrible sketches that they just sit with their mouths, with their jaws dropping like the producers.
The north, it's interesting you say lads from the north, because I suppose we have a sort of, we're a bit hard-wired to think of northern comedians as basically good-hearted, you know, basically
Yes, I know.
Ken Dodd, Les Dawson.
That's right.
And actually it's yes, it was quite a shock that these kind of dark, evil people came.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I think I look back. I'm very proud of the league, and it's the springboard for everything I've done since. Really, it's an inexplicable hit, and it was only stuff that we ever found funny, which is the only way you can do it. You know, as soon as you think that you're trying to write for what is it that people like about what are we doing, you know, try and find the magic formula, and you're doomed, I think. So we've just only ever pleased ourselves. I think that's our greatest strength, that it's been quite undiluted, and it's arrived without many people interfering with it. I think that's the great problem with, certainly with comedy. You get too many cooks, and then they cater for no one in the end.
All your careers have gone onwards, and Mark Gatiss is currently brilliant at the National Theatre, and
Yeah.
you are on your way into a new musical, is that right?
I am, yes.
Betty Blue Eyes.
Betty Blue Eyes, which is the new Cameron Mackintosh musical based on the Alan Bennett film, A Private Function.
Is the singing challenging?
I did the producers actually for a year. I was Leo Bloom in the producers.
so
Mel
you've-
Brooks's. So I've sang and danced for a year. So I've had my toes dipped in that world before. It's tiring, and this is a new musical, so the entire rehearsal process will be great, because it's kind of, to be there from the beginning is a very different thing to slotting into someone else's shoes.
I'm fascinated that your other talent is as a cartoonist, and I was wondering how that relates to creating characters, because of course a cartoonist has to have a very strong sense of how the line of the eye or the stoop of a shoulder or
Yeah.
a crookedness gives a character all its character straight away in a
Absolutely,
few
yeah.
lines. So
Yeah,
does
few brush
it help
strokes.
you to think of yourself as a cartoon when you do parts?
Well, I use it at the beginning and the gestation of characters. I often do lots of drawings of how I imagine the person to be, and across the board I've done that with all the characters, and a lot of those drawings end up in script books, and I give them to Yves, our costume designer, who's this French man that's been with us from the beginning, and he's great at capturing and kind of using the initial thoughts I've got and then just kind of running with that. And it's I think I do use that. I mean, I feel like I don't use my art enough now. I don't draw. I'm not as good as I used to be, so I don't keep my hand in, but I should do.
Sitting out at the musical rehearsals, do you draw the rest of the cast to their annoyance?
I should do, yes, but then I'll probably have no friends by the end of it.
Vicky, how do you relate to all this?
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, because we'll come to the business of line and look in a minute, but there also are elements of darkness and a bit of the supernatural in your performance in
Yes.
January. I should say in the London International Mime Festival, Vicki is doing her new work Fallen with her group Upswing Circus. The word circus is a bit misleading here, but your training is in circus and aerialist work, isn't it?
Yeah,
So-
my background is in circus. I trained at circus school for 2 years, and then worked with a variety of traditional circuses, doing everything from flying trapeze to riding elephants. So my background is kind of very, very traditionally circus.
It's always a great challenge to describe non-verbal performances properly on the radio, but people can have a little look on YouTube at Fallen. It's a storytelling thing, isn't it? A
Yeah.
woman who's a refugee,
Yeah.
as your family were.
Yeah, it's the piece is kind of inspired by my experiences and my mother's experiences coming to the UK, and I think it's very appropriate that it's non-text based, because when we arrived in the UK we didn't speak any English, so I spent the first year of my life in England just watching people and trying to read people by their actions.
How old were you when you came?
I was five. So I picked up the language very quickly. It's lucky that I was that age to kind of get immersed in the culture, but words don't interest me so much as the way that people act and behave.
Well, in the little clips that I've seen, as I say on YouTube, on the internet, the woman is being treated almost as a puppet at the beginning. I mean, she's kind of being moved around. There's kind of beds and things, and she's on this wire, but she's helpless. Is that the refugee feeling? Is that what you're?
Oh, I think the experience is different for everybody. But I remember the first few months we came over here, we were kind of in this limbo state where we weren't quite sure what was happening back home. We left quite abruptly, and our family lost everything in the process, including my father. And for a long time, we didn't know whether he was alive or dead. So we were in this kind of limbo state where we didn't quite know what was happening, where we would go, where we would end up. And it felt like being just kind of pushed around from pillar to post. So that opening sequence is about that feeling of kind of not having control of your own life anymore. And
how does the control come back in the narrative? How does that?
The piece is also about bereavement and loss. It's about how you deal with bereavement and loss and how you find your own way to recovery. And in the piece, this woman is caught in this kind of holding space, this limbo state, and she's visited by these supernatural elements or hallucinations. It depends on what your interpretation is, whether you're religious or not. And through these visitations, she finds a way to resolve herself with the loss, and she takes control back for herself.
So is there a degree of what you might call spirituality in it?
There is. I mean, I've grown up in a very spiritual community. The West African community is incredibly spiritual. My mother was raised by nuns, so she for her healing process, she turned to religion. And there was an incredible amount of comfort for her in religion. I've grown up over here, so I'm not religious. I'm not Christian, but I really I could see the strength and the support that she got through having those strongly held beliefs, and whether they're real or not, they meant so much to her that they got her through.
What about African spiritualities? Is that something that you've explored?
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, African churches, this weird amalgamation of kind of European Christianity and traditional spirituality. When we're young, we often had ministers from African churches come and hold these little ceremonies in our home, and there's this idea that you can, as a person, speak directly to God. You can speak directly to spirits, and they can intervene in your life. And it's a very, very, very kind of powerful, imaginative Christianity.
And let's just fill in how on earth you ended up in this particular profession, because a refugee African child, now the tradition within African families over here, black African families, does tend to be very much about education, about self-betterment, about respectability. It does not on the whole tend to be about running away with the circus.
Running away with the circus isn't respectable, is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm saying I'm just thinking of friends I have in Nigerian, Ghanaian communities. It's not quite done.
No,
was there an element of that?
There was an element of that. I have to admit that the first 6 months where I actually ran away with the circus.
You were studying something serious, weren't you?
Yeah, I was at university doing pharmacology, and I graduated. But whilst I was at university, I fell in with a troupe of circus performers, and I literally ran away with them at the end of university, and I didn't communicate with my family for about 6 months because I was just petrified about what my mother would say when she found out. And when I finally did speak to her and she found out what I was doing, the response was as expected. But I think I've been doing it for 15 years now, so she's slowly come to terms with the fact that it is a passion. It is something that moves me, and it is something that I'm committed to doing.
And you must have had a talent. You must have had a...
I hope so.
I mean, but to be an aerialist, I mean, this is not everybody has even the sort of the physicality for it. But you suddenly discovered you could do this.
I think that was part of falling in love with circus, because I'd always been encouraged to be academic, and that was kind of quite a clear pathway. It's straight lines. You study hard, you go to university, and then you find a job. and there didn't seem to be any excitement in that. And you know, the journey we had to arrive in the UK was full of instability, so I felt like I'd been forged in instability. So suddenly looking at this pathway for myself that was really kind of rigid and set, there wasn't any excitement in it for me. So circus was amazing because firstly it was physically challenging. It's mentally challenging because you're always kind of having to fight your own understanding of what your body's capable of. So it's very challenging mentally. And then I discovered that you could be creative with it.
Well, we shall see in January at the London Mime Festival. Reece is looking as if he wants to run away and join the programme.
Self-healing.
Brief him
We
in a
need
minute.
a ringmaster.
Yes, absolutely. I'll come and do
When the
that.
programme ends. I don't know whether the distant Gordon has been inspired to
Not a day goes by that I don't think of running away with the circus. Even
But
at the moment.
you'd have your
I'm just-
camera with you, it would be hopeless.
It's funny because
if you're ever watching people.
I was telling my kids what I wanted to do when I was a child, and one of the first things that I thought as a possible career was to be a clown. And I don't like clowns, so I don't know why I wanted, but I definitely wanted to be one. And maybe it's just the kind of prospect of being a professional idiot. But it's kind of odd, but certainly
We're kind of getting back to teenage boys again.
Yes.
I think. Hey, we must end, I fear, because that is it for this week, time-wise. Thanks to Vicki, Amedume, Reece Shearsmith, the distant but dauntless Gordon, and Les Persaud. Power to all your enterprises. Happy Christmas. But we are back next week when among us will be two heartthrobs, Rufus Sewell and John Sargent. Join us then.